As we continue our reflections on Joshua's final sermon, we come to verses 14 to 28 of chapter 24. And Joshua's appeal to the people here commences with a rather striking comment. He says to them, "Now fear the Lord." Thus, the call to not fear that has resounded throughout the book seems here reversed. Yet this is more apparent than real. In fact, Joshua's word highlights the need for loving respect and the consequent unqualified, indiscriminate obedience that is the cornerstone of a wholesome, healthy relationship with God. The call to throw away the gods of your forefathers worshipped beyond the river and in Egypt also sounds strange. Surely they could not still be implicated in the sins of Abraham, even if the residual impact of life in Egypt might have still clung to them. However, the ancient world was dominated by two superpowers and the cultural and religious imperialism that came with it. Israel was also subject to the local subculture, the gods of the Amorites, as they are referred to in verse 15. Joshua's words, therefore, may best be seen as a call to ensure that the people are alert to the dangers and seek to free themselves from all earthbound worldviews that constitute idolatry. This, he indicates, has been his own habitual practice, since he says, "We will serve the Lord" in verse 15, which is perhaps best translated, "We will continue to serve the Lord." The people's response in verses 16 to 18 bears all the apparent marks of what Joshua was seeking. With some indignation, "Far be it from us," they say in verse 16. The Israelite assembly respond. They echo Joshua's earlier words and affirm that the Lord's mighty acts in the past on their behalf were such that we too will serve the Lord because he is our God. In the light of this, Joshua's response in verses 19 and 20 seems surprising. Yet there's a profound realism here. Hitherto the people had acted like a weather vane, thus their words were cheap. They demonstrated a failure to grasp spiritual realities. Professions of service of the Lord cannot be made without due recognition of divine holiness, his claim to exclusive lordship, and his hatred of all conduct that fails to account for such realities, and the people needed to learn that. The Lord is a holy God. He's a jealous God. He will not forgive your rebellion, your sin, says Joshua in verse 19. He's not merely there to be a pocket miracle worker. Thus Joshua's response to the people is a call that they recognize their own frailty, face fairly and squarely the nature of God, and their need for both a deeper motivation for service and their utter dependence on the grace of God. Notwithstanding Joshua's ongoing warnings, the people profess, "We will serve the Lord our God and obey him," verse 24. This may perhaps suggest progress, since in the earlier verse they had merely said, "We will serve the Lord." Possibly there is evidence here that the Israelites were coming to recognize that it was not confessions of faith or regular and correct worship that constituted them the people of God. Rather, faithful listening in a life-changing encounter were essential. This, and only this, is the true service of the Lord. All else is a counter witness. Thus Joshua who was present at the previous ratification of the covenant, renews it again in verses 25 to 28, and once more provides a visible reminder in the landscape to the promise-making and promise-keeping God, and to the responsibility this placed upon those who followed him. Joshua could do no more to secure the faithfulness of those who followed him. He was indeed a soldier, and his career had been essentially military, but he speaks to them not of conquest, not the sound of trumpet and the gleam of the sword. None of this can be recognized in his address, but the holiness and obedience which become the chosen of God.